Actually, I would like to maybe make an introductory note, just explaining in brief what critical minerals are. And these are minerals which are required for the energy transition to decarbonized economy. And there are different classifications, including the ones from the World Bank, from the EU. But generally, what we understand the critical minerals are, these are like minerals like lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, those minerals required for producing solar panels, for example, or wind turbine, these electric cars, of course. So when it comes to like global demand, because of the commitments made by countries to decarbonize their economies because of the climate change, demand actually drastically grown, and it's expected that by 2040s demand for example, nickel and copper and lithium will quadruple. So this is the new oil. This is how the critical minerals being called. And actually, there are few countries in the world which possess the key minerals deposits. For example, the lithium reserves, about 80% are in Chile. When it comes to the cobalt, they are mostly in Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. And China, of course, possesses rare earth mineral deposits. Kazakhstan also has some of the critical minerals, and we, because I'm from Kazakhstan, so when I say we, it's Kazakhstan. We actually ranked amongst top 5 having copper, having chromium, uranium. Tajikistan also, because this was the other country I was looking at when, you know, comparing China's influence in mining sector in the region. Tajikistan is also quite rich, and I can actually give you some numbers, but basically Tajikistan holds the 3rd place in the world for antimonium reserves. But when it comes to China, what is more important, that China actually holds the majority of processing. That's why, for example, for Kazakhstan, China is the main route of critical minerals export. While for Tajikistan, for example, it's also one of the main routes for export, but for Tajikistan, the situation is a bit different because China actually holds stakes of the mining companies developing critical minerals. So my point is that the presence and role of China in mining sector, and particularly in critical minerals development, is very important, although it's different. So for Kazakhstan, if you look at the ownership structure, then in Kazakhstan most of the big mining players are owned either by locals or by Europeans. While for Tajikistan, they have different situation, and China plays their role in Tajikistan in different ways. Because for China, for Tajikistan, they actually have a huge debt for China. It holds 40% of their total debt. And for example, more than 90% of the how they call it, working licenses, right, for people to have rights to work in Tajikistan. More than 90% are given to Chinese citizens. So what Chinese companies do in Tajikistan, they provided loans in exchange to, sometimes it is called minerals for loans. Like the scheme in again DRC, they use the same scheme. So it's not openly, you know, spoken, and not that this information is publicly available, but this is how it looks like, and this is what experts say. That basically this is how China's companies enter into the mining market there, because of, in exchange to the loans they provide. Actually, both in Kazakhstan and in Tajikistan, there are requirements for mining companies to implement so-called social infrastructure projects. And companies sort of obliged by their contractual obligations to do some, you know, projects aimed at supporting and developing local communities. They do build roads in some cases, schools, hospitals and stuff like that. So these are absolutely valid examples for both countries. Because I was working quite, and I'm still working on extractive industries transparency initiative, ATI, implementation in both countries, which requires, you know, to have this information transparent and open. And that was also mentioned during the conference, that the narratives from China are different than the narratives from, for example, let's say democratic world, right? So it's often been said and noticed that the information is not either not at all transparent or not fully transparent, and basically companies need to, these days they also need to report on ESG standards, which is environmental, social and governance reporting standard. They have to report on ATI, but quite often we face that information from Chinese companies are not that easily accessible. And this is one of the challenges we face. First, I would like to say that Chinese influence is even getting bigger, because back in May this year we had this Central Asia-China summit, where it was announced that we will be building like shared future. So this was the words used during the summit, and not only words, but actually it had practical outcomes. Kazakhstan signed more than 40 agreements with China after the summit, and Tajikistan signed, I believe, 25 agreements, some of them related to mining and critical minerals in particular. But what I was saying before about the narratives and about that sometimes it is a perception, sometimes it's very true that information is not, that the companies working in the region are not transparent and accountable enough. And this is one of the challenges, right? So what we, and actually we as countries of course also have our strengths and weaknesses, and both countries are the members of BRI, and as I said, it has, huge opportunities, and also it has certain risks associated, right? And what we need to do, we need to actually build counter-risky strategy when involving in business with Chinese companies. We need to look at maybe alternative export routes for critical minerals. But in addition to this, maybe economic aspects, we definitely need to focus on anti-corruption, transparency, and accountability issues. And when I said that we also have our strengths and weaknesses, in terms of the weaknesses, both countries are not very highly ranked in transparency, international corruption perception index, for example, or any other related indices. So we need to work on our internal governance systems, being it more accountable to citizens, and this will also be reflected in working with Chinese companies.